cafe was unusually quiet for a late afternoon, the kind of silence that settled between soft music and the distant hiss of the coffee machine. Only a few tables were occupied. At one corner table sat a well-dressed man, his laptop open, graphs and numbers glowing on the screen. His phone buzzed occasionally with notifications, reminders of meetings, investments, and decisions worth millions. He barely noticed the world around him. That was when a small shadow appeared beside his table. He looked up, slightly irritated at first, expecting a waiter. Instead, he saw a little girl no older than 7. She clutched a worn toy car in both hands. Its paint was chipped, one wheel hung loose, and a strip of yellowed tape wrapped around its side as if someone had tried and failed to keep it together. Her clothes were clean but faded, and her shoes had scuffed toes. What struck him most were her eyes, wide, careful, and filled with a quiet kind of hope. "Mister, can you fix my toy?" she asked softly. Her voice trembled just enough to show how much courage the question required. She held the toy out toward him as if it were something precious. "It was our last gift from Dad." The words landed heavier than any business report he had read all week. For a moment, the man simply stared at her. His mind, trained to move quickly, slowed. He had negotiated billion-dollar contracts, dismissed proposals without a second thought, and made decisions that affected thousands of employees. Yet this small, fragile request caught him completely off guard. He slowly closed his laptop. As he took the toy car from her hands, he noticed the details. The tape wasn't random, it had been wrapped carefully, patiently. Someone had tried hard to save this toy. The wheel was loose but not lost, the damage not beyond repair. He imagined a father kneeling on the floor, promising it would be okay, promising he would fix it later. The little girl watched him closely, barely blinking, as if afraid that if she looked away, the moment and her hope might disappear. "Your dad gave this to you?" he asked gently. She nodded, clutching her fingers together. "Before he went to heaven." The cafe noise faded into the background. In that instant, the man felt something unfamiliar tighten in his chest. This wasn't about a broken toy anymore. It was about memory, loss, and a child holding onto the last piece of someone she loved. And for the first time that day, the millionaire wasn't thinking. "I'll try," the man said at last, his voice calm but sincere. He wasn't sure why he said it so quickly. Perhaps it was the way the girl's hands trembled as she held the toy, or the weight behind her simple request. He glanced around the cafe and raised a hand to get the barista's attention. "Do you happen to have a small toolkit?" he asked. The barista nodded and disappeared behind the counter, returning moments later with a modest box. Nothing fancy, just a screwdriver, a pair of pliers, and a few spare screws meant for loose chairs and wobbly tables. The man thanked him and placed the box beside his coffee, as if preparing for a task far more important than any meeting. He turned the toy car over in his hands, inspecting it carefully. The loose wheel hung by a thin plastic thread, stubborn but salvageable. He loosened his tie slightly, rolled up his sleeves, and began to work. The little girl leaned closer, standing on her toes to see better. Every small movement of his hands held her complete attention. When the wheel was aligned properly, her face lit up. When the screw resisted, her smile faded into concern. She said nothing, but her emotions shifted with every turn of the screwdriver. A woman stood a few steps behind her, clearly her mother. She clasped her purse tightly, uncertainty written across her face. "I'm sorry," she said quietly, stepping forward. "She doesn't usually bother people." "It's no bother," the man replied without looking up. "I'm glad to help." The woman hesitated, then spoke again, her voice low. "Her father passed away last year." The words were not dramatic, just honest. That toy, it meant everything to him. The man's hands paused for a brief second. "I'm sorry," he said softly. From that moment on, he worked slower, more carefully. Each movement became deliberate, almost respectful. This was no longer about fixing plastic and metal. It was about preserving something fragile, something tied to love and memory. The cafe seemed to hold its breath as he tightened the screw just enough, testing the wheel gently with his thumb. It spun smoothly. He looked up at the girl. "Want to see if it works?" She nodded eagerly. When he rolled the toy across the table and it moved without wobbling, her eyes widened. A quiet laugh escaped her lips, pure and unguarded. The mother covered her mouth, emotion rising in her eyes. In that simple repair, something else was being restored too: trust, warmth, and a small piece of joy neither of them had expected to find in a quiet cafe that day. When the toy car rolled smoothly across the table, straight and steady, the little girl clapped her hands in delight. "It works," she exclaimed, her voice bright with disbelief and joy. She picked it up carefully as if it might break again just from excitement, then pushed it once more to be sure. It rolled perfectly. The man smiled, an unguarded smile different from the polite expressions he used in boardrooms and interviews. Something warm settled in his chest, something he had not felt in a long time. This moment carried no profit, no recognition, no measurable outcome, yet it felt more meaningful than the deals he had closed earlier that week. "You take good care of it," he said to the girl. She nodded proudly. "I keep it safe," she replied. "It reminds me of Dad." He gestured to the empty chair across from him. "Do you want to sit for a minute?" The girl glanced at her mother, who hesitated, then nodded. She sat down, placing the toy beside her like a trusted companion. The man closed his laptop fully now and turned his attention to her. "What's your favorite subject at school?" he asked. Her face lit up as she talked about drawing pictures, about her best friend, about how she liked recess the most because it felt like flying. He listened closely, not checking his phone, not interrupting. For once, time did not feel like something chasing him. Her mother watched quietly from the side, surprised. She had expected a quick fix and polite goodbye, not conversation. She noticed how gently he spoke, how he listened as if her daughter's words truly mattered. "I used to come here with her father," the woman said softly when the girl was distracted with the toy. "We never imagined things would turn out this way." The man nodded. "Life changes quickly," he said, sometimes without warning. When it was time for them to leave, the girl stood up and hugged the toy tightly. "Thank you," she said, looking up at him. "I won't forget." He reached into his wallet and pulled out a simple card, sliding it into the mother's hand. "For repairs," he said quietly, "in case anything else needs fixing." She started to protest, then stopped, her eyes filled with tears as she nodded. "Thank you," she whispered. As they walked out of the cafe, the man sat back and exhaled slowly. The room felt different now, lighter somehow. He realized that the toy had never been the real thing that needed fixing. It was his perspective. And in helping a child hold onto a memory, he had found something he didn't know he was missing. Weeks passed and life returned to its familiar rhythm. Meetings filled his calendar again. Flights, negotiations, and long hours blurred into one another. The cafe became just another stop in his routine, a place for coffee between appointments. Yet something about it lingered in his mind, though he could not quite explain why. One afternoon, an envelope waited on his desk when he returned to his office. It was plain, slightly creased, with his name written carefully on the front. No company logo, no return address. Curious, he opened it. Inside was a short handwritten note. The mother thanked him for his kindness. The card, she wrote, had helped them through a difficult month, covering school supplies, part of the rent, and a few groceries when things were especially tight. At the bottom, written in uneven letters clearly belonging to a child, was an extra message. "The toy still works. I play with it every day. Thank you for fixing it." He read the note twice, then a third time. For reasons he didn't fully understand, his throat tightened. He had donated to charities before, funded programs, and written checks large enough to change balance sheets. Yet this small note carried more weight than most thank you letters he had ever received. Later that day, he found himself back at the same cafe. He sat at the same table, ordered the same coffee, and looked around slowly. Nothing had changed, the same soft music, the same warm lighting, the same quiet hum of conversations. And yet, everything felt different. He imagined the little girl pushing her toy car across the floor at home, smiling without worry, holding onto a piece of her father through something so simple. He realized that the repair he had made took only minutes, but its impact had stretched far beyond that moment. For the first time in years, he questioned how he measured success. That week, he began making small changes. He listened more carefully to employees, to strangers, to stories he once would have brushed aside. He funded fewer headlines and more quiet causes. He stopped rushing through moments that did not involve numbers or outcomes. No one noticed these changes immediately. There were no announcements, no press releases. It was a quiet shift, internal and steady. He folded the note carefully and placed it in his wallet behind his credit cards and business cards. It became a reminder, one he carried with him everywhere. As he stood to leave the cafe, he glanced back at the empty chair across from him and allowed himself a small smile. He finally understood something that had eluded him for years. Sometimes the smallest fixes mend the biggest things. And sometimes a broken toy is all it takes to change a life, especially the one doing the fixing.